About a year ago, I had a out-of-body experience that was the kind where you are you're playing out a role. You still identify as yourself, but it's like you are playing a particular role in an attempt or in a manner to kind of understand or to see how that role works. Rather than role, I'm going to say intelligence, how that a particular intelligence operates. It would be similar to, for example, some people have spoken about how they have entered the body of an animal and kind of sensed the nature of that animal. So this would be like zoning in rather than thinking of an animal, for example. Focus, like when you're out of the body and focusing on an animal, it would be more like focusing on the intelligence that animal represents. Kind of building a model where there's different types of intelligences and there are different types of instances of those intelligences. I guess we could call that like almost like a morphic field, like Sheldrake's morphic field. There's a morphic field for a dog. There's a morphic field for a human. They can interact with each other. They can create a third field where the two of them interact. And the morphic field has, strong biological support for its existence. Of course, there's certainly many more questions than there are answers. And some scientists think it's complete malarkey. I've read Sheldrake's writings on the morphic fields, and it makes perfect sense to me. But I'm not a biologist, but conceptually it does make sense. Now, the reason I introducing this particular thread in this manner is because I had an experience where I was experiencing the intelligence of plants. Maybe not all plants, but you'll see what I mean in a moment. It has been my my contention that plants are remarkably intelligent, simply due to the fact that they have the ability to transfer light, non-material energy, electromagnetic radiation, into material. They transform and store the energy of the sun. That's amazing. That really is amazing. And when you look at how it's done, it really is phenomenally sophisticated. And if you consider intelligence as the ability to solve problems, one of the criteria for intelligence, well, I mean, plants certainly do that, don't they? They solve the problem of being able to physically exist, because without plants, nothing would live. I mean, for life to exist. So, in this particular out-of-body experience where I was connected to, or I guess, where I was playing in the role of, how do I say this? Where I was basically instantiating, I was experiencing the instance of a plant. And I didn't realize it at first, because in this out-of-body experience, I found myself in a extremely advanced and sophisticated non-Earth culture. I'm not saying it was another planet, could be, or another dimension, most likely, but it wasn't anything from here. It was a non-terrestrial culture, remarkably advanced. And part of within this culture, the participants, of which I was one at this point, they all had their different tasks. Mine was I was an explorer. There were a bunch of us in this particular group that were explorers, and what we would do is we would be sent. We would be put inside a capsule, and we would be sent out into reality, into the universe, until we landed somewhere, till we ended up somewhere. When we ended up there, we would leave the capsule and attempt to exist. Really, is what it comes down to. We would attempt to survive. The capsules were remarkably sophisticated. And within the capsule was everything that we needed to survive for these long and risky journeys. The capsules were also sealed, where we could not get out until we had landed in a place that allowed us to get out. If we happened to land in some place that we could not get out, that was the end of the journey for the explorers. That was boop, gone. Interestingly, we had a window. These little pods had a window. Okay, so I get in a little pod, which is impossible to explain, but it was remarkably sophisticated. Like beyond what we would normally think of technology. The pod was kind of like a living thing that we became, that we interacted with. It had an intelligence of its own, put it that way. But its intelligence was only to maintain itself. Inside that pod was the explorers, was myself. We were the intelligence that had the intention of going somewhere and doing something, of spreading ourselves. The intention of the pod was to just be a pod. The intention of what was inside the pod was essentially what the intention. We were the intention. We, the explorers, were the intention inside the pod. We'll put it that way. So off I go into the dark void. I don't know how long I was in this pod, but at one point I saw land. I saw like a planet. And as I was coming down into the planet, I saw that I was heading towards what looked like a tropical paradise. I mean, it was gorgeous. The water was beautiful, and there were trees and beach. I mean, it was like it was like in the Caribbean or something, or like in Rio. And I'm like, well, this is great, because we were, as the explorers, we were all familiar with some of the more challenging and difficult places that one might end up and may or may not, succeed or even survive in such a location. So this was great. And I was like I remember being very happy that I was about to land in a paradise. I land in the paradise. However, I'm not completely on the land. My pod is a little bit in the water. And the pod could not open in the water for whatever reason. Pod would not open in the water. And I had no control over the pod. So I just had to sit there and wait until I ceased to exist, or the pod doors open, or the pod opened. And it was kind of at that realization that this simulation or this experience, the end of the story of what I was being shown came to an end. And I came back. And what I realized was I was a seed. This was the story of seeds from everything, seeds from trees and plants and weeds, and this was the intelligence of a seed that was spreading itself, or a plant that was spreading itself through a seed. The idea that we could zone into an intelligence, and rather than an instance of an intelligence, to me, this is a new idea. I've been having out-of-body experiences since I was quite young, like 8 years old. But this is a new one. This is a new concept to me, because it requires a worldview where you understand. It requires a worldview where you can build an understanding of independent intelligences, independent and codependent intelligences that interact with each other, much in the same ways that pretty much everything interacts with each other. Sometimes cooperatively, sometimes not cooperatively. There are those that dominate. There are forces that dominate, and others get absorbed. New forces are created when certain ones join. Thinking of these as various forms of intelligence for me, it was an entirely new perspective on really how reality works, or at least one perspective of how reality works. If you view the universe as an intelligent entity, an intelligent force, like the panpsychism concept, where consciousness and or intelligence is a property of existence, and it actually holds up under some scrutiny, in my opinion. So it's an ancient idea. It goes back thousands of years, actually. But it's a whole new perspective, and especially when you're out of your body, that perspective can be, at least for me, really effective in tuning into a particular intention or intelligence or a process of how things work, by understanding how the intelligence behind that process. That's that.